Hello, everyone. Welcome to this third live session and conversation over at the Wearfair IG account. And also, I'm trying to be consistent in uploading these to our YouTube channel. So yes, also welcome to anyone who's listening to this in the podcast-like style from the future, I guess. Today we are going to be talking about extending the lifetime of garments in the fashion apparel industry, thinking about repair and care of our clothes. Today with me I'll have Reka, who I hope to be able to get on. So let's see. There is a comment section, so please get yourself involved. Hello, Reka. Lovely to see you.
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Technology is working. That's one good thing.
It's always the biggest challenge, right? Cool. Another challenge is that sometimes I get bees and I'm super scared, so let's hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, so I just shortly introduced that we're going to be talking about the fashion industry and especially how we can take care of our clothes better. I guess before I jump in, I'll quickly introduce myself. So I'm Olga and I'm the founder at Wearfair, which is a small sustainable fashion brand based in Scotland. I guess, again, before I jump in and give the floor to you, Reka, I think it's cool to maybe share our story, which is kind of, I don't know, going back 5-6 years now. So we met at the University of Glasgow, where we both studied business and management. And I guess besides being really great friends, I think we really understood early on the importance of ethics in the business industry in general, and then again, I guess in the fashion industry especially. And I must say that I think, Reka, you were one of the first people to introduce me to this world, so I'm eternally grateful. And yeah, I've always had this thought in my head of you in our last year, traveling back and forth between Glasgow and Copenhagen, where you were attending workshops at the Copenhagen Youth Fashion Summit, which is largely around sustainability in the fashion industry, and then taking final exams in Glasgow. I mean, to me, it's like the biggest determination and motivation, and I always think about it like, wow, this is, if she can do that, I can do whatever I want. So yeah, I guess that's the backstory. But I would love to learn, and I guess the audience would be super keen to learn about where you are at now. I know that you're obviously doing your PhD at Lund University over in Sweden. So I'd love to just briefly get to know what you're doing up there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. And I must say that the inspiration is mutual because, yes, thank you for having me on your platform, and the work you're doing with Wearfair is really motivating as well. So thank you for having me here. And yes, as you mentioned, I am currently doing a PhD at Lund University, Department of Service Management, since 2019. And yeah, this has been really exciting because here I can really match my interest in fashion and also conduct research. So yes.
Really cool. Yeah, I guess you part of what you're doing is talking about the care aspect. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you've already kind of established, where you're at with your research and things like that, and just why you are so passionate about it? Like, how did you arrive to where you're at now?
Yes, so I think you mentioned earlier this that we had this recognition of the importance of ethics and sustainability in business, and we had that course during our third year at Glasgow, and I think that was really eye-opening in terms of what I wanted to do with the business degree later on. And simultaneously, as I also studied psychology, I became really interested in consumer behavior and consumption research. So to integrate these two interests, in the dissertation in Glasgow, I found this fashion sustainability and sustainable consumption. And that really directed my interest towards Sweden, because I noticed that countries had very strong research programs and a research background in this field. So yes, that was very influential. But I think when I started my PhD, that was the time when I really started to read about the importance of recognition of our planetary boundaries, for instance. So really going back to this ecological economics understanding of how the volume of production that our Earth system can handle. And yes, that was a challenge to put this understanding with my fashion and sustainability and consumption. So, but that I was thinking, and that has to be longevity. So the importance of yes, keeping what we own for a longer time.
Mm-hmm. It's quite an easy concept, but then in practice, I guess it's not. It's challenging, right? And I think, yeah, the planetary boundaries, they place, I guess, boundaries on how much we can consume, which kind of, brings the idea of taking care of the environment, and fashion industry is a huge part of it. But yeah, I guess based on your experience to date and kind of what you're doing in your PhD, why do you think longevity is important? I mean, it's a huge question, but I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah. So there are many different graphs and illustrations circulating around. For instance, I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a report on how during the past 20 years, the volume of clothing sales increased while the use through that speed reduced and decreased. So that's very much a change that happened during the past 20 years, that the active use time also reduced, but also the use we get out of each item. So the number of use we get out decreased quite immensely. And it's hard because the current fashion system and many of the business models are not necessarily there to accommodate the change and shift to a production and consumption model that could be handled by the planetary boundaries, for instance. So yes, I think this is one of the key importance of clothing longevity is the recognition that we have to do that because of the clothing planetary boundaries. And if we think about circularity, for instance, which became sort of the framework sustainability pathway for the industry, we can also see that many of the current implementations start to, perhaps ignore the importance of slowing the material loops. So they very much focus on recycling and closing and getting back what they produce, and perhaps innovating and finding out new ways of reusing the material. But the circular economy, the original concept, recognizes the need to slow the material loops as well. And that connects very much to clothing longevity and keeping and using what we have for a longer time.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, we can go into recycling. It's a huge topic, and I think, I mean, as a brand as well, it kind of goes into how I think about longevity, and kind of it comes at various stages. And I think firstly, it comes at the design stage. So as a creator of a product, as a designer, which I'm not, but still I'm making the decisions every day on how the products will look and what they're going to be made of. And obviously the choice of material is a huge one. Firstly, because it has to stand the kind of test of time. But I think primarily, I think for me is actually the end of use phase. So I'm not a material expert or fabric expert in any way, but from my own personal research, I found that actually blend materials, like if we have a mix of cotton and, for example, elastane, then it's really hard to recycle that because it's actually really difficult to separate the fibers. So I made the conscious decision to use only cotton and things like that. And then obviously you can do a lot of different things for longevity, but I think if you're thinking about producing and creating products, then you also have to think about where is this product going to end up when it's used.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, recycling, I think in the industry in general, is not very common still, and very little is recycled, I don't want to lie, but a very tiny percentage of what's actually produced is recycled. But that kind of makes sense because it's, as I said, it's difficult if there are, and most items that we have are blends of different fibers. So that's what I've learned from owning a brand and creating products. And I think then longevity in its sense is super important, and it's important to educate the consumer, and in order to let them understand, you know, the problem and why is it so important that they actually keep them in use for as long as possible. Because obviously there is no real solution right now to recycle them, for example, or to repurpose them. So that's what I'm trying to kind of educate, I guess, through doing this kind of things, or through my post that I post, any sort of messaging and communication. Hopefully it's picked up. But I guess, yeah, it's also from my own personal experience, I tend to reuse as much as possible. So I don't know, if I have like a cotton t-shirt, then I will, before I throw it away or donate, because then I don't really know what's happening with that. And you know, you never know if the donation platform you're using is going to utilize the clothing properly. Then I prefer to actually reuse it. So I don't know, I'll use it as a pajama first, and then I will cut it up into like a kitchen cloth or something like that, and then I know exactly what's happening with that item. So I guess that's what I'm trying to also pass through, those kind of longevity principles that I personally apply to my life to Wearfare as well. But yeah, I guess there's also this idea that I've been exploring of non-linear business models, and I guess also kind of care models, which again, I know you're the expert here. So for me, it's very difficult as a small business owner, again, to navigate that space. But obviously there are so many cool initiatives, and maybe I can learn something from you right now. If you could share maybe some of these that you already saw in practice, maybe from bigger retailers.
Yes, yeah, reacting to what you said, I think it's really important that we recognize the technological barriers and what we currently face with the recycling. So exactly what we can do now is to keep what we own for a longer time. And of course that it also depends on design principles. So like how are the clothes made, and how, yeah, keep motivating consumers even through that initial investment that they put into the product to keep it for longer. So it's very interesting with that example that you mentioned as well. But so in my PhD research, I would say it has like two research focus, and the first one is very much related to this how can retailers work with this idea of clothing longevity, especially with current business models, which we know, for instance, if we think of the largest retailers in Sweden, for instance, H&M, they were set up maybe 50, 60 years ago. Then we didn't, well, it was a different sort of clothing longevity, right? But now we need a new wave of clothing longevity. And perhaps it's not necessarily that easy to implement at first hand for if they've been producing in the volumes that we see. So, but I think it's interesting that it's still like popping up in different retail settings, that they talk to consumers and address this need to keep and use what you have. So yeah, but of course then we need to think about of how much is this sort of fitting with the marketing messages that they communicate with the new seasons and the collections that they're dropping is yes. So very much the care messages that we currently see on the retail market are in a way like very much niche in their communication, and then they still of course have this fast production model. But if you're looking for like examples from the retail markets, for instance, yes, so as I said, I'm conducting my research in Sweden, so I'm focusing on different Swedish fashion retailers, for instance, H&M, also Nudie Jeans, Filippa K, who are like smaller players. But to say and pick an example from H&M, it's quite interesting because they are very openly talk about being that they are delegating themselves as being the circularity leaders, and they want to encourage change makers, and they see their consumers as the change makers for this clothing longevity. So within the circularity framework they have different aspects, such as take back for recycling, but then they have take care, which is addressing the need to extend the lifetime of products also through the use phase. So what can consumers do according to them? And then it's also very interesting of the responsibilities around clothing lifetime. So of course it depends on design, but we also know it depends on how it gets used, and emotional durability, for instance, like for how long we can love the same item. So these different care initiatives in retail settings have to address many different aspects. In terms of durability, they need to focus on how to fix what's broken, how to assist consumers to repair maybe themselves or offer repair services. On the other hand, there's the emotional durability, being bored with what we own. Then for that, they need to offer upcycling tips, such as, very simply put, maybe iron on different patches and personalize the item. So they have all of these tips. And I think why it's very interesting to look at it is this: how is this slower model that they communicate fits in with their current business model. So there's a dichotomy there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I always think of. And to be honest, even as a small business owner, you want to push out really quality products, and you have the values that you stand by, and you want to attached to the product that you're selling, but at the same time there is also that at the back of your head that okay, but we're still selling and we are still producing, so how do we balance that? I think that's very tricky to achieve, even for small sustainable fashion brands, but yeah, I think there is that higher purpose that drives us, and slowing down the industry, I think, is the key goal, because I think there will always be a need for fashion, and I think there should be, because it's fun and it's great. But yeah, absolutely, I agree. And yeah, it's a huge challenge for established brands, which establish themselves especially on a kind of fast fashion basis. So
yeah.
I mean, there's so much we can talk about. The one thing that comes to mind, and it's actually a mutual project that we're on, V4 SDG, so that's Visegrad 4 SDG Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And so this is a common project we're working on, simply, I guess, because we are both from Central Europe. So Reka's Hungarian and I'm Polish, and we grew up to a certain extent in those countries. And I guess now living abroad, it's really cool to be able to navigate that space again and help out in many ways that we can, taking our kind of experience and knowledge. And in this project that we're currently involved in, we're looking at the European Green Deal, which is basically a call for policy intervention on climate change in the EU, and especially something that interests us both is this right to repair, which I believe in the UK they also have maybe already passed an equivalent law, which basically asks manufacturers, they're basically legally obliged to provide spare parts, is that right? For appliances to basically extend their lifetime. So things like fridges, TVs, any sort of house appliances, that's when the manufacturers really have to provide parts in order for customers to be able to repair them easily and cheaply, which is obviously a bonus point. And I guess what we have also discussed is kind of how do we apply that to the fashion industry and whether it could be applied. And I guess maybe even taking that East Central European or Eastern European approach to that, because obviously we have that mindset, I guess, or we know that mindset besides that Western mindset. So I wonder if how could that all be combined under that umbrella, if you can share that with us.
Yeah, I think this is, yeah, as you said, it's a lot to cover here, and I think it's very interesting to get involved with some sort of forthcoming policy and see how that perhaps apply to different regions due to sociocultural differences. But as we talked about slowing the industry, yes, of course, these retailers, for instance, then they would need the policy support to do that, and not necessarily just support, but also policy push and motivation to look for different avenues, and for instance providing and scaling up repair services could be one of that. And if you think about this right to repair, that might be motivating this move in this industry, and at least provide some support. And I think what you were hinting at, Olga, I think it's really interesting with the, for instance, different regions have different background with the need and importance of repair. And as we know that in the Eastern Bloc, this consumer society reached those countries a little bit later than in, for instance, Western Europe. So that means that maybe a little bit more households on sewing machines, or the repair skills to conduct at home are maybe one generation or closer. So I think when we think about implementing different repair services around different regions, we need to look at what is the market infrastructure, but also what are the social cultural relevances to the families and households, consumers in those regions. And one more thing, maybe in between this interaction of policy and industry, we know that especially large retailers very much follow what's forthcoming in the industry. So when we had extended producer responsibility in the textile industry, then suddenly many of the retailers started to implement take-back systems. So when you can return your clothes for recycling. And similar, if this European Green Deal starts talking about right to repair connected to their sustainable industry initiative, then perhaps we can see an increase in these offerings as well, and the highlighting the importance of care as well connected to repair. But of course, these need to be scaled up, and there needs to be some sort of paradigm change to highlight the real value of garments. Yes.
Yeah. I just thought about it, but we work on a project called No One Left Behind. So basically looking at, from a citizen kind of perspective, that no one is left behind in this transition in the green economy. But actually also no one left behind could be applied to retailers, organizations. No one wants to be left behind, you know, in this race for what's new to come and what innovations can keep you competitive in this new landscape. That's quite a revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, looking at time and knowing that you have to leave 6 p.m., I have two questions which we got before, which I think are really cool, and maybe we can jump into them and see if we have any more questions coming through. But yeah, the first one was actually if we have any tips for at-home repairs. So I can quickly go with that one, because I just what I do myself is to get creative. So mending, upcycling, and that kind of thing is one thing that I do. And I usually just go on YouTube and just watch some stuff, and then kind of that creativity sparks. One book that I just love is by Lily Fulop, and it's a cool Instagram account as well. It's called Wear, Repair, Repurpose, and I actually have it here. It's a really cool one, and I just like to flick through it and just get inspired, and I think that's what any one of us can do. You don't have to buy a book. This was gifted actually, but yeah, YouTube is a good one, I think. I'm not an expert on sewing or anything like that, but I think it's a good source. Do you have any maybe tips for anyone?
Yeah, I think this being brave is important too. So like just go ahead and try. And for instance, a recent example that I know of from Lund University, I know that the students set up this thing called Circle Center, where they pick up different aspects of the circular economy. And they also had a workshop online about specifically how to care for your clothes to ensure that they have extended lifetime. So they cover different repair and mending tips as well. And I think it's just quite interesting to look at different, even if you're at university groups, societies, because I think it's up and coming.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, it's cool that you mentioned kind of local groups, because I think more and more, wherever we go, wherever we are, there'll be groups which do these kind of things like repair centers and things like that, and get involved like in this way. It's super cool. But yeah, then the second question then we had was, how do we know which materials of clothing will stay good or stay in good condition for a longer period of time? And I guess that's when we are shopping, and we want to ensure that the material that we're buying into is good enough. And I think when I was thinking about this question, I thought of kind of two ways. So obviously we want to make sure that the material is good enough for longevity. So I usually tend to go for natural fibers like cotton or linen or wool or leather, controversial, but yeah. And then from the other side, I think it's kind of like, how are we going to use that item? So for certain occasions, I don't know, like a summer dress, I made the mistake to buy like a polyester dress. Please don't do that, because you're gonna boil and you're gonna sweat. It's plastic. So if you're using that on summer occasion, then yeah, make sure you'll read the content and you read the care label and stuff like that to make sure that it's a material that will be suitable for what you want to use it for, that particular garment. And then similarly, you know, it could be that a jacket is you know, a winter jacket could be made from like recycled polyester, and then it's okay because it keeps you warm, versus that dress. So yeah, I think about the use case, and if you do end up with, I don't know, a really good linen dress, then obviously then you can use it for many, many occasions, and that provides longevity. I know for sure that the dresses that I bought, which are polyester, I don't wear because it's just so not comfortable. So then obviously that does not mean longevity. I don't know if you have anything else to add here.
Yeah, I think material is quite important, and very much. Firstly, also how that garment was designed. So, like how not only the choice of material, but how is it put together and sewn together. So, I know online shopping during pandemic is maybe not the most suiting context for that, but when you're in store, you can try to really feel it and like have a look at the seam and make sure that there's no like threads coming out already at the store, because we can see many of that examples as well, unfortunately. So just develop the critical eyes for the garments. And then secondly, I'd like to highlight again that how long it will last is also about how we use it. And for instance, just a very simple example, tumble drying is often make your clothes shrink and not so good for the consistency of the garment. So maybe avoiding that, hang drying, can also help the material to last for longer.
Oh yeah, I did this mistake to put a wool jumper in a washing machine, not hand wash it, and it's like tiny, tiny, tiny now. It just shrunk like 10 times. So yeah, definitely I would say if you do the bare minimum for longevity, it's to read the material and what it's made of, and then make a conscious decision whether this is what you want for this particular garment, and then yeah, the care label, and make sure that you understand the symbols. I think they're universal across the world, more or less. So yeah, should be easy to navigate. Yeah, I think that will definitely ensure more longevity. And I think that's kind of a very positive note to kind of wrap up. Um, I'm really thankful that you joined me today and shared all your knowledge with us, as well with the audience. I hope you enjoyed it.
It was a pleasure, and really thank you for having me. And I really enjoyed the questions from the audience. I think they were very
Yeah,
the point of the key questions.
absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning in, and yeah, see you next time. And have a good evening.
Exactly. Bye.
Thank you.